Folks, a very good morning, and welcome this Friday morning to another Coffee at 11 show, and this time featuring our first Frenchman, Pascal Derrien.
Oh, you get that right.
You are more than welcome. Please say hello and show us your coffee.
Hi guys, you love my mug? Yeah, I really like what's inside.
I love it. I think Kathleen is on the show there, and I think I can see what's coming down the track here. Do you like my mug? I love that. Pascal, pleasure having you on. Let me just tell you all, before we bring the man himself in, a little bit of the stuff that I know about Pascal. And it's some journey. Pascal Derrien, business name SPADE Community Enterprise CLG. What does your business do? We make others shine. I love that. How long? Established 30 years in September 2020. How many employees? 3 on the payroll, but hosting 30 companies with 120 plus staff. What's really interesting about Pascal, I know Pascal for a number of years, he's got a very diverse background and experience gained on various international markets, roles, company roles, sizes and segments. So he's been in the corporate world with Corporate Gateway. He's been with Gateway with Microsoft, with Sony, from Western Europe through the EMEA markets. He's been with SMEs through DataPart, startup, talent, cloud media, social enterprise, consulting, frontline, make changing roles. Have been in sales, ops. He's been CEO, recruitment, marketing, and he's led teams from small to large international teams. He says he's got a funny accent. He's got strong ethical and corporate values, and he's socially driven. I think that's going to come across very clearly today. He adapts to change very quickly. I think that's going to come across very clearly today. Huge experience in metric setup. Communications is a key skill. Here's something interesting. He has an International Diversity Advocacy Award from 2018. Looking forward to hearing about that, Pascal. He's a diabetic marathoner, and he says that shows discipline. I'm quite sure it does. Also a long distance cyclist. Listen, I think that's enough for now. The most intriguing thing I found in Pascal's litany of achievements is he says he lived in a caravan for the first 3 years of his life. So Pascal Derrien, bienvenue, if that's the correct term. And
Perfect. I think your French is better than mine at this stage.
Thank you for joining us, Pascal.
Thank you.
Introduce us to the man before we get to SPADE. Bring us through that journey.
Okay. So first, you're gonna have to bear with me with my funny accent for a while. So if you don't understand me, feel free to ask me to repeat. I won't take it personally. And there's a test at the end about my family name, by the way, for everybody in the audience. I was born in Paris in 1968, so I'm giving my age away here. 3 weeks after, I was shipped over Germany. And the first 3 years of my life, I don't remember how many borders or towns we lived in. And because of that, we ended up living in a caravan. So my dad was a squad engineer for the equivalent of ESB networks in Ireland, so it was called Gaz de France. And I was working with a squad on setting up the new networks in France. So the missions were pretty short at the start, from 2 to 6 weeks. So there was no point in renting or settling anywhere. So we ended up living in a caravan. I had a dog who was looking after me. There's a lot of crazy stories, which I obviously cannot remember, but I was told a lot of stories about, stigma, stereotypes, and a few other things that actually stayed with me as long as I can remember. After those first 3 years, the missions became a bit more sophisticated, and we ended up staying for a period of 3 to 4 or 6 months. So until the age of 16, I ended up doing 2 schools per year, roughly 2, 3, sometimes 3. And I would pick up accents. So we would be north of France, then going near the Spanish border. So it's like having a Derry accent going to Cork. So it's pretty interesting. So I was a blow-in all the time. I've never had the right accent. That's the story of my life to this day. I don't really worry about it as long as I get by. But what it did teach me is to adapt. Change is actually a second nature to me. I don't stress about it. Now people stress about the fact that I don't stress about it, but that's a different story. But I tend to adapt to change relatively quickly, and it's been a a constant in my life. And I only realized recently that I probably need to tone down when it comes to change because not everybody is on the same page. So that was me. I got back to Paris when I was 16. When I was 16, I actually was competing in cycling, and when I was back from training once, I ended up having a very bad crash, a car crash. Actually, the fact is actually I was not in a car originally, I ended up in a car. I can tell you there's better ways to enter into a car. Use the door, not the windscreen. But subsequently, I ended up having probably a year or two out. I had huge difficulty to speak. I had to recover. I had to adapt, and I had to adapt to a new reality again. So I ended up speaking like Billy Idol for almost a year and a half, and then I regained my speech and my ability to do things. I got back to competition, even though I was not great, but it was important for me to go back to competition. So that was the first defining moment, really, per se, you know, at an early stage. Then I went to school. Well, I suppose, as I said to Kathleen once, I went to the building, I went to university, but I realized I didn't want to do history. Well, actually, I loved history, but I didn't want to be a teacher. France has been in recession or in crisis for as long as I can remember. So I ended up joining Sony for 8 days, and I ended up staying there 8 years. What I did there is, my first job was not sexy. I was offloading truck at 4 o'clock in the morning by -5. But a few months in, at the age of 19, 20, they gave me a team. I ended up managing a team of people who were all older than me. So it was a crash course. And again, I had to adapt a new reality. And I had to be humble as well, because there's not much I knew. And in those days, you were not trained. So sink or swim. I stayed for Sony 8 years. I got a business unit at 23. In the meantime, I met my wife, who's Irish, who, unlike me, has a brain. She was finishing something very complicated in Pasteur, I think a PhD in pharmacobiology. I don't even understand, you know, the title of the thesis, so it's as complex as it can appear to me. And then we decided, after a number of years, that maybe, you know, it was time for me to leave the Japanese and go to Ireland for a year. So that was 22 years ago. I'm still here. And I'm gonna probably fast track a bit. So I ended up working for Gateway. I worked for small SMEs, spin-off of a company in Ballymount. I ended up in Microsoft for a job I was hired for a job I actually never done. I had 3 or 4 jobs there. I launched Xbox 360 in Europe. I work on Central and Eastern Europe market. I was director of business ops for global organizations. That's the type of things. Then I left. I have to say I managed my exit, which gave me the comfort of doing what I wanted to do. I ended up working for 2 companies as I was asked, because I was the founder, to lead a small startup, originally for 3 months. It ended up being 2 years, way longer than I originally anticipated. So that's why I took another job, which was in a social enterprise with a company called Frontline Make Change. We're actually providing alcohol and drug abuse support. So it's counseling mainly. But they had in mind to work on a social project from an employment perspective. So I did that job. I did the market research. We got some awards. But you know, those 2 roles became counterproductive from a time perspective. I think it became almost schizophrenic as well. You cannot be in 2 places at the same time, and I had to recognize that. So, cut a long story short, I left the 2 projects in order to focus on one. And I've been judging the Spark Awards the last few years with Peter McVeary. And we were in Letterkenny back in September judging, and after the event, I say, well, what are you doing at the moment, Pascal? And say, wow, not too much, Peter. You know, I'd love to go into the third sector. I don't find it really easy. I say, you know what? Just go and try. With famous last words from Peter, that's what I did. I ended up in SPADE. And SPADE is obviously we have a charity status with a CLG, but it's not necessarily purely a charity. It's an organization.
And before we go there, Pascal, thank you very much for bringing us up to speed. That's some journey, right? Part of the history. Couple of things that I just want to touch back on, if I may. I've noticed a pattern. I don't know if you've noticed this looking back, but I've noticed a pattern that you always start something for a short period of time and then you always stay longer, right? 8 days became 8 years, 3 months became 3 years, etc. Right? 1 year in Ireland has become 22 so far. So there's something in there that's I'm reading it as dependability. I'm reading it as that, you know, when you settle into something, you give it your best. Love the fact that you managed a team of older people when I think you said you were early 20s, 23, I think, and that made you humble. I love that. I love that, because when you're a young whippersnapper, you got these older people that you gotta manage. You gotta find a way of having them listen to you. So congratulations on all of that. Before we go to SPADE, when we were chatting yesterday evening, you mentioned something about Peter McVerry and the link to SPADE. This is about going back to the accent. And what did Peter say? I thought it was fascinating.
So yeah, so Peter told me, I said, you know what, I think you're probably going to have some difficulty, Pascal, because, you know, you're a bit of a blow-in. Yeah, I say, oh, you know, no kidding. But a blow-in in terms of the sector. So the sector is incredibly exciting, but it's also incredibly conservative when it comes to hiring. So I thought with my, I suppose with my, without bragging too much, but I thought my profile was decent enough and my competencies were transferable, that maybe naively I thought, oh, maybe I'm going to be snapped, because obviously I don't need to earn 190K. You know, I'm fully aware of the guidelines and the principles in terms of salary. But no, it did not happen. I really had to convince people that actually could do it. And I think there was probably a bit of unconscious bias, you know, at work, figuratively speaking. And I think, you know, it took me a while, and I got turned down on a few roles where I didn't get the first round of interviews, and it was a bit disheartening, to be honest, because I had really my heart in, you know, making a change. You know, I'm in my 50s. I don't want to spend the 10 years of my life in a corporate world, or spending my life in airplanes, which actually is not going to happen anytime soon anyway for anybody. But to go back to this, so Peter was really encouraging and say, you know what, you're going to crack the nut. You know, somebody's going to give you the opportunity. And it came in the form of SPADE. You know, when I did the interview with the board, there was actually no questions about, you know, it was more my ability and what I could bring, rather what I did. And I found that pretty refreshing for a small organization. So I think Peter, he doesn't really, well, he knows where I am, but he probably doesn't really understand how defining it was as a moment to keep me going, because I was starting to re-put my CV towards corporations, and not necessarily what I wanted to do, but, you know, after 6 months, you're starting to doubt about your own ability. And, you know, self-doubt is a good engine anyway, but it was bringing me to a road that I didn't want to go to.
Yeah, it's great. I found that just that snippet you gave me last evening very interesting. So Peter McVerry is saying, yeah, you're the right guy. You've got it all on the CV, but he said, you know, you're going to have problems. You don't have the right accent. You're a little bit too corporate for them, and they won't understand your motivation. But he also said you will crack the nut, not keep going. So we're delighted that he did, and we're delighted that you did. So tell us about SPADE, and bring us through SPADE, if you wouldn't mind, up to COVID, and touch on the International Advocacy Award, please.
Okay, so SPADE. So SPADE is a CLG. It's a charity. We have a charity status. However, we have no funding. So we are self-sufficient from a finance perspective. So that's pretty important to understand. So SPADE was set up way before I was born, almost. No, it was set up in 1990. It's a decommissioned Church of Ireland building, and we also have three premises. So initially, it was set up as an organization who would provide a safe place for unemployed people to set up business, obviously at a preferred rate in the heart of the town. It did that for 10, 15 years, and then obviously the market was evolving, so startups came on board, the notion of incubation came on board, and SPADE grew from a very small player to something which is a bit more, I suppose, prominent in a community in between Stoneybatter and Smithfield. That's where we are. We're stuck in between. But also the larger Dublin, and I would dare say Leinster, and probably Ireland to a certain degree. We have a mix of 40% are what I call foodies. So we have anybody from one-man show to Hoshi Foods. We have 4 million turnover, to services company, IT, sign language. Also, we have some B Corp, like Moyi Coffee, with one of the few B Corp in Ireland, fair chain. So we have a strong social enterprise footprint, innovation in terms of startup, and also we invite the companies to be with us for a period of 3 to 4 years. They establish themselves. We are not a commercial landlord, so I suppose our rents are probably at a very progressive rate compared to the likes of Iconic and Workdays and people like that. But we really encourage people to graduate from a startup then to a more established companies. Now we have a 3-tier almost in terms of services. You can start in an office on your own, or even in a small kitchen. You can graduate to a bigger one, and then maybe to another one. And then after that, I tend to encourage people to move on, because that's important. So our ethos is very different as opposed to a standard landlord. And we don't like actually the term landlord. We are catalyst. We're here to help, because beyond just the hard facts of renting the building, we also routinely set up network events. We help people, because not everybody is good. You can be a great engineer, but you may not be a great businessman. So we help people. So we are very fortunate to have ICE in our building as well, Inner City Enterprise, which is headed by the fantastic Ivan Kilmer. And we leverage that as well, whether you need some help in terms of marketing, online development, or whether it's actually just running your business from a cash flow perspective. So we are different. We have a different value proposition. And I'm actually glad to announce, maybe for the first time, that we receive a Business All-Star accreditation in our own category last week. So that shows actually the value of what we are doing. And that's a process we initiated 6 weeks ago, and it's pretty intense, as you know. And I was delighted that Kapil, Elaine, and Kieran came back to us and said, thumbs up. I think you guys ticking the box on everything. And it's good, and just finishing that, it's good because we have a different value proposition than anybody else. I think they're really focused on the social aspect of what we're doing.
And I just wanted to come in and congratulate you, and I wanted to ask the people in the cafe to give you our standard cafe round of applause. We use the deaf community round of applause because everybody's muted. So I just wanted to congratulate you on that. That's a wonderful achievement. If I may, I'll also comment on the board of SPADE and their good choice in choosing you as the CEO, because you're not just a landlord, you're not just a facilities manager. You have spades, dare I say it, buckets and spades of experience that you personally can bring. You can see stuff that these startups who are in there with the head down, they can't see what's going on, and you can, if you like, helicopter in and say, do you know what, Johnny, I think you might need to talk to Mary over here. Is that a fair assumption, or sorry, a fair reflection of your work?
Yes, I think especially in the current climate, I think it's important for certain companies, I think some hard decisions will have to be made. You really need to ask yourself the question, is what I'm doing going to be viable going forward in the same way that I'm doing it, or do I need to do something else in order to achieve that? Are my objectives still realistic, even though everybody has to revise their forecast? At the moment, as soon as you finish your forecast, it's irrelevant and obsolete. However, I think people need to have those questions. So without not necessarily giving any tips, because I think it's pretty presumptuous, but what I've applied to myself is, you need to plan the future, whatever it might be. So obviously there's an element of speculation into it, but you need to you really need to plan the future and be very, very humble, and at the same time ask yourself the very harsh questions about what you're doing. There's no place to hide over the next few months from a business perspective. So we're going to have some difficult discussions with maybe some of our members. or we're going to point them towards, you know, really, I think you need to think something. You were maybe on the edge before the crisis. Where does this leave you now? Have you really thought about it? Do you want to move into a debt territory? Do you want to move into personal debts? I know by experience that we have one of our members who was in a startup mode, and they have decided to shut up shop permanently in the middle of the crisis. And at the beginning, I thought it was a bit drastic. And then, you know, they're young boys, they're 25, the two of them, and they decided that actually, you know what, we're not going to run our lives to the ground over the next 10 years because of this. So we're going to hit the button, pause, do something else for maybe 1 or 2 years, and we may go back to this idea in 2 years when the market is a bit more settled. Now, for the business who are a bit more mature, that's different. But I think everybody would have to ask that questions. We have been asking that very questions in SPADE ourselves.
Again, very honest. Thank you for that. And the whole idea of what I'm trying to achieve here, I think what is being achieved here is real people coming on, telling real stories about where they were, where they are now. So we're in the middle of COVID journey for you in SPADE at the moment. You said something again to me last night. You used a lovely phrase. I made a note of it. You said, at the moment, good is good enough. Love that phrase. At the moment, good is good enough. Would you expand on that?
Yeah. So I think in terms of all the decisions I had to make the last few weeks, some were done on the fly, some were done with the information I have at hand at that moment. So the world is not perfect by definition, but in COVID, there's no perfection whatsoever. So I think if your decision is good enough on the day you are making it, to me, that's good enough. You shouldn't have a manager, a CEO or a board who come back to you bombarding you with, but what's going to happen in July 2020 at 6 o'clock in the evening? You cannot, nobody can answer that question at the moment. You know, and I really, really advise people who are having those discussions just to push back. I think good is good enough. I think it's around the controllables. So the controllables is actually what you can control. And there's so many variables at the moment. I just finished a revised forecast yesterday. I know it's obsolete because even my confidence level from 3 days ago to today are not the same. I was thinking that maybe we would be reopening mid-May. This morning, based on what I can see, I'm actually not so sure. But you know, I'm going to stand by my forecast because that's what it is. I have hard data from January to April, and then I have a bunch of variables from May and June, and I have probably soft data after that. I will have to revise my forecast on a quarterly basis on this type of things. But what I've been saying, for example, to the board, and obviously to the staff, is that year is different. You know, forget the budget. We're never going to recoup the losses. Accept it and move on. What we can do is damage limitation and reinvent ourselves, but we have to accept 2020 from a business standpoint is actually different. And I'm not saying it's bad. You know, it's going to be good. You know, I've seen some people pivoting very quickly among my membership, 3 or 4 or 5 of them were really, really good online. One, and I'd like to mention him because I'm a big fan of his job, Sam Pearson from Vegan Co. Sandwich Company had to close down permanently, well, no, temporary, sorry, for 3 weeks and got back into business last week in the middle of the crisis because he's decided to shift his delivery and collection and all these type of things. Is it perfect? No, but he's back in business. So for me, good is good enough.
That's wonderful advice for everybody. And see, the great thing with this, I was watching everybody taking notes. Everybody's got a different perspective. Everybody's got a different reality. And something you say will mean something to somebody out there. So whether it's on the call here or on the video afterwards. So Pascal, thank you for that. I love the honesty of those two 25-year-olds. They've decided, you know what, we're just starting up. It's too difficult now. It's too many variables. We're not going to give the next 10 years of our lives to beating down a door that may never open. So they've decided to take a step back. I also loved what you said. We have to do forecasts for sure. We got to be humble in our forecasts. We've got to realize if it's good enough today, it's good enough for now, but be willing to change it next week if we need to. And also we should really be asking ourselves, I picked this up from you, Pascal, we should really be asking ourselves, pre-COVID, was our business viable, right? Because if it wasn't viable pre-COVID, we should really be asking the hard questions now. Is it, you know, never waste a good pandemic, never waste a good crisis? Could now be the time to actually fold up somebody's tent and reinvent and go again? So interesting times. Post-COVID for you, post-COVID for SPADE, what's it look like?
So post-COVID for SPADE, so obviously we have we want to firm up our current business, bring more people on board. I really want to develop the social enterprise cachet or stamp of the companies we are bringing in. However, post-COVID, I may have to alter the model as well because we still have to function from a financial standpoint and make sure we may actually give opportunities to SMEs who have been in business longer than a startup, but we will prioritize people who have a social enterprise footprint, blueprint, people who are sustainable as well, especially around the area where we live. That's pretty important. We also have another project. We've been awarded by the EU by tender 2 years ago, 2 million worth of project development. And under the guidance of Enterprise Ireland, we are developing a shared kitchen project at the back of a church. It's going through the DCC planning at the moment. There's been a lot of work, market research, all these type of things, but that will actually develop the brand SPADE as well in the area from a social enterprise perspective. So shared kitchen, for those who may not be aware, we're going to have 14 kitchen stations, and it's basically, you know, 1 or 2 or 3 man and woman show who are starting in business. They cannot really have premises. They're going to lower their overhead, all these type of things, and they may start their business with us. Again, it's an incubation project, and once those people actually are ready to move on, they're going to spread their wings elsewhere. Ideally, they may spread their wings with us because we have kitchen units who are EHO approved, if they have some available. Otherwise, we may encourage them to liaise with some other CLG organizations. We are part of NASEC, which is National Associations of Community Enterprise Group nationally. So there's great organizations. I salute Lisa Rowntree from Hayes Park in Clondalkin, who's doing a fantastic job as well, very similar to us. So you have quite a lot of other organizations in the network that will be able to facilitate those people graduating from shared kitchens to a more industrialized process when they move on to food academy or this type of things under SuperValue or Musgrave or else. So we have that. It's in the works. It's at planning phase, costing phase. We hope to see the first stone put in place maybe in early 2022. But that's a very exciting development for us as well, because it's going to be, it's adding to what we are providing, but it is a whole new dimension to it as well. So it's very strategic, and we are leveraging expertise internationally as well. So one of our consultants is based in Holland, and we have EI, obviously, who's guiding us as well. So it's a very exciting project for us.
It sounds very exciting. It sounds very exciting. One thing, if I may, Pascal, say to you that has come through this conversation today, and thank you for coming on and having the chat, is your passion. You're absolutely passionate about helping people, right? That's, to me, it's very obvious. My dad has a saying, stop selling, start serving. And you know, you don't sell SPADE, you just serve the people in SPADE, and you've created and are continue to create an environment which will attract more people in, so you can serve them so that they can move out and make space for other people. So congratulations, I think it's lovely.
Well, thanks. You know, it's not about me.
No, I know that.
As I tend to say, you know, we tend to make others people shine, you know, and we're a mere catalyst. So I'm just an actor.
100%, 100%. Absolutely, this is about SPADE, but it needs leadership, and you must at least accept the compliment in there that you're, in my opinion, you're providing excellent leadership. Now, before we go to Q&A from the floor, I will be asking you for one tip. Before we go there, I have a question, if you don't mind, and it's around your recent health challenge, because when I knew you first, you didn't have the health challenge that struck. It did strike. If you don't mind touching on that.
Yeah, so yeah, I'm one of those lucky recipients who is diabetic. There's 2 types of diabetes, for those who may not be aware. So there's T1, which is immune and tends to be early onset. And there's type 2, who is late, well, I suppose late stage onset, and it's more around metabolism. while I had a really healthy lifestyle, I was an athlete. It turned out that more than a couple of years ago, I ended up being diagnosed with diabetes. Now, I should have known better because my own dad was diabetic. So I should have seen it coming, but I was a bit in denial, providing I had a really healthy lifestyle. I'm not overweight by any means. I eat pretty well. I don't even drink alcohol. So, it was interesting. So I found out actually, if you are a son or a daughter of a diabetic, you have 10% chance to develop it no matter what. So cling, cling. I won. What, again, had to adapt. So there was an initial shock. So why me? Why this? And then I realized that, it could be worse. Let's call it a gentle reminder. Maybe it's somebody actually, we're going to throw something in the spanner in the wheels just a bit, just to make things life interesting for you. Because, between 50 and 60, it's called as, sniper alley. So, okay, I got lucky. Only got just a gentle reminder. So I decided pretty much relatively quickly for me, but not necessarily more, it was more for my family, for the people who are around me, to adapt and, for better words, to embrace it. And so obviously it comes with I'm medicalized. I'm obviously on a strict diet. There's a lot of do's and don'ts. So you have to show discipline. You have no choice. That's, well, you have the choice not to have a choice, but, that's not the route I'm planning to take. I have still young kids, and I have a lot of things to do. So I decided to embrace it, but what it gave me is an opportunity, and I sound like a motivational speaker now, an opportunity to harness and harvest the challenge in making something positive. So, and again, there's people who have bigger challenges in their life and they overcome it. So, we need to put that at the right level. It's a problem. I have to deal with it. Funnily enough, I do a lot of running, as you know. Not that I'm really good at it, but I run. I became faster. I run longer. And yeah, overall, I was starting to reach times which were at regional level, which for a non-club runner was pretty interesting, because I always do my own things, as you can guess. I'm a pretty unorthodox in my training, but however, I started to have really good sensation on marathons, better than I have had, and actually I became a better person to a certain degree. So it's still there. It won't go away. I think at this stage I'm on the lower end of the spectrum. However, that's something when you cannot lower the guard. So it comes pretty handy in lockdown, I can tell you, because discipline and adapting is pretty second nature to me. However, I would encourage anybody, since I have an audience today, who's over 40, to go and get yourself checked, because it doesn't happen to others only.
Pascal, thank you for sharing that. Again, you touched yesterday evening on the fact that even your children now, they're reading the labels behind on product, and they're saying, Dad, you can't have this, or here's one you can have. So that's really interesting. I love the fact that you said, I'm beginning to sound like a motivational speaker, because for those that don't know, Pascal is allergic to motivational speakers. I'm one of the very few that I'm allowed to interact with Pascal. So Pascal, I don't think you're going to say you sound like a motivational speaker, but you're a very motivational individual, and thank you for that. Okay, before we go to Q&A from the floor, because I'm sure they're queuing up to ask you questions, you've already told us to go and get ourselves checked. One tip, how are we going to get through COVID in best shape?
I'm going to give you two tips, because I don't do things the way people expect me to do. But one tip personally, I think there's business and your personal life. So personally, I think it's important to keep sane. So whatever I'm doing myself is I run every 2 days within the 2 kilometers radius. I obviously don't do long runs, but I do a 5K run every 2 days. And actually, my son is coming with me on some of the runs. So we take it as an opportunity to bond, we chat. Yesterday we did speed, but most of the time we just run, the two of us. So I think that's important. So whatever works for you, reading stuff, I think you need to look after yourself and be a bit selfish, not self-centered, but you need to be a bit selfish. I know in the current climate, everybody wants to give to everybody, but I think you need to protect yourself, because if you're not good, you're not going to be good for anybody. From a business perspective, and I know Hemon already, I suppose, mentioned that in a chat box, plan the future. It sounds a bit counterintuitive at the moment, but no, plan the future based on what you know. I think that's really important. Project yourself in the future, because it's very doom and gloom at the moment. I think we're going to get out of this no matter what. It may take a bit longer than planned, may not go as fast as we would like it to be, but at some point we're going to be on the other side. And I think we need to be ready. So, and as ready as we can. Again, good will be good enough. You don't need to get the perfect plan, but aspirationally, I think you should tend to think towards the future and what it's going to mean for your organization. And that's very, very important.
Fabulous. 2 tips, one personal and one professional. Thank you, Pascal. Okie dokie, who's got the first really hard question for Pascal? Sarah Ward.
Hi, how you doing, Pascal?
I'm always good.
Yeah, that was very interesting. I really like that. I have 2 questions. I'm kind of like you. I like to get in as much as I can. The first question is, when you change your diet, do you put it down to the changes you made that's the result was your speeds went up and your endurance went up and your lengths of your runs and your timing and everything improved? Do you put it down to your diet that you?
Well, my gut feeling is yes. And my diet actually was already pretty okay.
Mm.
So, which is interesting. So when I made minor changes, I got the results straight away. From an energy perspective, and it was more consistent. So I'm normally a ball of energy, but before I would be a ball of energy 3 days out of 4, and I knew I was functioning on 3 cylinders as opposed to 4. When I made those small changes, and that's why probably I got a very quick result within a month. Yes, I could notice, and then gradually I built on that. So now I can have actually, I was to a certain degree, I was actually almost too strict, I was told. I should have afforded myself a few treats, which I do now. And I'm running less faster, which I suppose I need to go back to strict. But no, joke apart, yeah, I found it was noticeable relatively straight away.
And what changes did you make? Can you name 5 changes? Or?
Well, obviously sugar had disappeared in all shape or form, as you can guess. But beyond that, there's good foods and not so good foods. So obviously sauces have disappeared to a certain degree. I still like a good curry, but it's going to be a yellow curry as opposed to a green curry. It's all about everything in moderation. And for me, it was probably easier. I don't drink alcohol, so I didn't have to deal with that. Probably harder for some people. But the change was more minimal. Which interesting is the results appear straight away. So if you have a very unbalanced diet, to me it leads that actually you're in control to a certain degree. And I think you manage your own destiny from a health perspective, and I think we should be accountable and responsible with our own health. And what happened to me is I presumptuously thought I was in a really, really good place. And no, not necessarily because of genetic factors, not necessarily because of lifestyle, but I had to really adapt. So yeah, I'm not sure if that answers fully your question.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I'd be kind of along the same lines myself. I would have eliminated a lot of stuff from my diet to make my body function better. And I'm always looking for tips on how I can improve it more, because it's one area that you can control. So basically, yeah, sauces and stuff, I could probably cut back on those. I kind of make my own sauces, but I mean, still, you're going to cut back on those a little bit. But yeah, I mean, that's all good. And I must admire you. You're very, very driven and very, you're very adaptable, which is great. And it helps, I suppose, through this I suppose, time, you know.
Okay. Cool.
Sarah Ward, that was lovely. Thank you very much indeed. And Pascal, that was a lovely conversation the two of you had. I love this, by the way. This is the conversation that happens in a cafe environment. And then the rest of us just get to listen in and we get to pick up snippets. So it's just wonderful. Sarah, thank you for that. Pascal, just by way of explanation, Sarah was our guest on Monday of this week. And she also, her phrase, by the way, was control the controllables. You touched on that earlier. Okay. But she suffers from ME and has been managing that since 2001. Sarah, you're a star. Talk to you later. Bye. Okie dokie. We're going to pass over to Princess Shelley now, who's going to come in and tell us what's been going on in the cafe. Thanks, Princess Shelley.
Hey Pascal, thanks for such great insight and great honesty. With a few comments here in the chat box. Lisa Chalfa came into the cafe and straight away said bonjour all. So I suppose highlighting your lovely French accent. Then Eamon said his favourite nuggets from Pascal include adapt to change, plan the future, be humble, ask yourself harsh questions. Good is good enough. That's Eamon who offered that into the chat. Kathleen also said, good, quoting what you said, good is good enough is excellent advice. We need to send our inner perfectionists on a long holiday.
I second that.
That's a really good one too, isn't it? And then Eamon said that you are not a motivational speaker, Pascal. You are an inspirational speaker for certain. So.
Oh gosh.
I love the eye roll. I was expecting that somehow. Then we have Ger White offered into the group. He commented, nice advice. Be selfish, stay sane. So nice and succinct there. And then Lisa came back to us, Pascal, and Lisa said, congratulations, Pascal, on the accreditation and for sharing your journey. Adaptability, I feel, is a key word you used and strong reflection in relation to going forward with business. Your positive attitude is fantastic, turning a negative into a positive. Your PMA, positive mental attitude, do you think there will be a surge of new innovative businesses?
You know what? It's the last 2 weeks I had inquiries for office units and kitchen units. And yeah, it's encouraging. I have 2 new future licensees that were to come on board in April, and obviously yet to have them this week. Are your plans still valid? You know, you still want to do this, you know? And they came back, yeah, we're going to do it. As soon as we can join you, we join you. And subsequently, I think with an effective marketing, especially in the SME world, I think corporate will have their own challenges and it's going to be very different. I think from an SME perspective, I think we're going to see a lot of downsizing, even though, resizing, should I say, in terms of business. And we also will see some people who have come up with new ideas and new businesses. So I think there will be some startup as well, but I think maybe there will be some good ahead of this for business. Obviously, some people will go through hardship and, you know, maybe hold the hard labor and what they've done in maybe the last 10 to 20 years will disappear. But it may only be because the market will make them irrelevant. And it does happen in any circumstances. It's just COVID has become an accelerator. It's not necessarily become the cause. So, you know, you need to think about the root cause rather than symptom. I know it's like a play on word in the current climate. But that's very important to think that, as Colin was saying, and he's saying a lot of intelligent things most of the time, is we're saying, you know, if your business was not viable before, you know, will it be viable after? You know, that's a question that everybody has to ask themselves.
Yeah, I like the way you say most of the time. I like that. We'll allude to that later. So Lisa went on to say, Pascal, that the quote, the best way to predict the future is to invent it. Something I'm repeating to myself, looking at this crisis as an opportunity to possibly reinvent. And just before I look for a raise of a hand, if anyone else has a question, just from myself, Pascal, I think one of the great things that we do, we come to the cafe each morning We listen to Column's great guests and interesting people, and we come as professionals or business people. And today you kind of spoke to me as a mother. I've 4 children and approaching some adults and approaching adulthood, and you opened up your interview with the statement that your first job was not sexy, except you said it much more eloquently and beautiful than I just did. And that's certainly something that I can pass on to my children. I can really relate to it, that, you know what, your first job doesn't have to be sexy, and that's okay. So thank you very much for that. And just before we go back to Column, is there anybody else on the floor that would like to ask Pascal a question? If you'd like to raise your hand, and I will see you. I know we've got some people on video and some people can't join us on video, and that's where they can pop into the chat. In the meantime, I will pop back to the Column in the studio. Pascal, thank you for your honesty, and Column, it's back to you.
Well, that was lovely. That was lovely. The Princess Shelley snippet in the show is great from my perspective, because I get to sit back and drink coffee and just watch what's going on. It's just lovely. So thank you for that, Princess Shelley. Pascal, it's just been a pleasure. You know, if you listen to those comments, what I said to you earlier is so true. Right? You said it to us all. Everything you said it to us all, but different people took different things from it. So I just think it's wonderful, and it's a real blessing that is coming from this Coffee at 11 show, which was just a COVID-related idea. What can I do? And I shared with you last night that my fear was I was banging on every Sunday about, oh, do you know what I thought of this week? And in COVID, I'd be thinking the same stuff every week, because I've got 2 kilometers to operate within, right? So this idea of pulling people into the cafe, having a chat, inviting others to Earwig is working beautifully from my perspective. So I really want to thank you for coming on and trusting that you know, it would be an environment worth investing your time in. So thank you for that. Very much appreciated. So let's just give Pascal Derrien our heartfelt thanks for being with us today. Thank you, Pascal. Before we let you go, folks, let me just thank Princess Shelley for producing the show, Eamon Smith for making sure we've been safe and secure, Head of Guest Services, and I see Katrina O'Brien there. Katrina is our Editor-in-Chief. She'll be going to work after the show finishes to make sure it's all beautiful by this evening. Thank you all for coming into the cafe today. You're welcome any day, Monday to Friday, 11 o'clock. And let me tell you before we go what's happening on Monday. Some of you will recall we had a major issue earlier in the week. On one of the days our show was hacked and therefore cancelled immediately. We reopened the following day, and the guest who was supposed to be on the following day was Amanda Delaney. Amanda very kindly stood to one side. She would have come in, shows the measure of the woman, but she just stepped to one side to allow us to address cybersecurity, which was the issue. And Amanda has agreed to come back in, and she's coming back in on Monday, which I'm really excited about. So Monday morning, 11 a.m. here in the Coffee at 11 cafe, we'll have Amanda Delaney. She is a business mentor and event organizer. She runs a group called We Can and We Will. We Can and We Will. And I'd ask that if you have time at all, please come to the cafe at 11 o'clock on Monday, meet Amanda. So once again, Pascal Derrien, it's been an absolute pleasure, my friend. Namaste.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. Stay safe all.